video games recon.
So, the first weapon we will be looking at is the LYNX. This weapon has made a return from Ghosts and is very similar to its previous incarnation. The LYNX is a semi-automatic rifle with by far the best range in its class, and since Ghosts, this weapon feels more mobile. Whether this is due to all the XO abilities or the gun itself, I'm unsure, but it definitely is a welcome bonus. The LYNX is a does what it says on the tin kind of rifle, with no particular gimmicks and is probably aimed at a less experienced sniper. Its damage is pretty weak, but its semi-automatic fire more than makes up for this. And comparatively, this sniper has a large magazine size of 8 rounds. The LYNX has 3 major downsides. Firstly, it has the weakest damage, which as previously discussed is negligible, but means more often than not you can wave goodbye to those one-shot kills. 2. This weapon has the worst handling, which isn't what you want from a gun that already has a major disadvantage to an SMG or assault rifle in medium to short range combat. And 3, it's just kind of bland and boring compared to all the snipers available thus far. These things combined make it my least favourite sniper rifle. The MAAWS is a bolt-action railgun with the best handling in its class, which as previously discussed is a major help for battles at medium to short range. Also, the MAAWS has good accuracy and range so as to take down targets at longer distances and has great handling and good mobility at those shorter ranges, meaning more often than not it's a one-shot kill, presuming you at least hit centre mass. The only downside to this weapon is it kinda has a slow fire rate, but to be fair, for a bolt action that is to be expected and doesn't impact too much on your performance. However, where the MAAWS really has an advantage over its rivals is in terms of reloading, as with this weapon you never, I repeat never, need to manually reload. As with every shot and bolt action mechanic, you reload 1 round at a time, meaning you never need to reload, and this party trick means if you're a competent sniper, those multi-kill medals are much easier to acquire. Furthermore, this weapon is one of the most fun, original and satisfying to use. The NA45 is an interesting weapon, and I'm sure within a very short space of time it's going to be hated by the more adept snipers and people who like to play in hardcore playlists, as this weapon is aimed at newbie snipers like myself. As this weapon holds a 2-round magazine. The first bullet in each magazine appears to fire and have effects like a normal, if weak, bullet. But if you look closer, the round appears similar in nature to an IED. And when the second round is fired in close proximity to the first round, it then detonates an explosive shockwave, killing those near it. So this weapon kind of feels like a hybrid between a standard sniper rifle and a grenade launcher like an XM25 for example. And for noobs like me, this weapon is so much fun, and unlike other sniper rifles, really comes into its own in objective modes like domination and hardpoint, as you can clear out rooms and damage multiple enemies at once on an objective. The downsides for this weapon are that if you miss the first shot and take too long firing the second shot, or vice versa, the damage inflicted will be minimal, and you will need to reload or switch weapon before the other player kills you, as the first shot alone is weak sauce. Also, if you're big into sniping, you're probably going to feel like the kills from this weapon are a little cheap. But for everyone else, you're going to love this weapon, if just for dicking about with when playing with your mates. Meaning it's a bit of a Marmite weapon and you're either going to love it or hate it. The Atlas 20mm is a straight up beast, and is akin to an anti-tank rifle. This weapon has by far the highest damage in its class, and will practically always one-shot kill enemies, sometimes even if you just hit them in the arm. the Atlas is a shoulder-mounted rifle, kinda like an RPG, and as such you cannot no-scope with it. Combine these two things, its high damage and no hip fire make this weapon a wet dream for both campers and quickscopers alike. However, due to the fact that you can't no-scope with this weapon, running a secondary is almost mandatory. The downsides to this weapon are obviously that you can't no-scope, making it an issue in tight rooms and corridors. Its low handling and lowest mobility of all sniper rifles make it, in practical terms, a quite difficult weapon to use, and as such is probably a weapon for the more skilled sniper, who can cope with its shortcomings. That said, you just can't beat that out and out power. The Stinger M7 is the first launcher available and is your typical lock-on based RPG. However, where the Stinger differs from most lock-on launchers is that you can also kill players with this weapon, akin to a javelin. Personally, I would have just preferred a straight up future reboot of the javelin, with its cool mechanic of firing into the sky and raining down death. Plus, sometimes you could kill players with indirect fire. Instead, the Stinger fires a spread of 4 rockets horizontally and basically gives you 2 shots, which is often enough to take down airborne kill streaks like choppers and so on, and is decent at taking out players, particularly on objective game modes. Although the slow lock-on sometimes leaves you in no man's land with your pants around your ankles. However, where this weapon really comes into its own is in playing support, as this weapon takes out UAVs with ease. Originally, when I first used the MAAWS, I thought it was a waste of time and a complete piece of shit, as it only has 1 round and seems little different to a standard fire and forget rocket launcher. However, a viewer on one of my previous videos pointed out that you need to aim down sights to use its laser lock-on ability. After I figured out this sweet little trick, I no longer thought it was a piece of shit, just a waste of time. Only joking. Although that said, the laser lock-on ability really doesn't improve this weapon that much, as aside from taking out close range slow moving aerial kill streaks, the laser guidance doesn't really come into play when firing at UAVs or fast moving kill streaks. It does however improve its usefulness against players, but with only 1 round I'd still rather have a Stinger or MAYHEM rocket launcher. The MAYHEM is your standard beastly little fire and forget launcher, apparently firing projectiles of molten metal instead of rocket propelled grenades. Not that in real terms you can tell or it makes a difference. The MAYHEM has 2 rounds and, like its namesake, is best for causing a ruckus on objective modes by blasting fools trying to cap a flag or take a building, often in such scenarios getting multi-kills. With that said, this thing is pretty rubbish when it comes to taking out kill streaks, as it has no lock-on ability, and as such you'd probably do just as good a job with blind eye and a silenced LMG. So all in all, a decent but pretty dumb launcher. But sometimes when you just need a sledgehammer of a weapon, pun intended, instead of a scalpel, you can't go wrong with the MAYHEM. The EM1 is the first energy weapon available in heavy category, and is available out of the gates from rank 1 and doesn't need any levelling in order to acquire. This weapon is a funny one, like all of the directed energy weapons. It comes with no ammo and instead it has an overheating dynamic, something akin to a battery pack, in that you can only fire this weapon for a set period of time before it overheats, approximately 4.5 seconds of constant fire before overheating without a heatsink attachment. And a cooldown period is needed again akin to a battery charge in order to use, which can leave you a sitting duck. That said, in my experience that rarely happens. Once you get your head around this weapon, you tend to shoot your weapon in short controlled bursts and rarely end up overheating. I could see how it could be more of an issue in more breakneck game modes like free-for-all for example, but in general a heatsink attachment, although beneficial, is not necessary. All that said, this weapon is not very good. Sure, it looks really cool and all, but its damage feels pretty weak, even though it says it has the highest damage in its class, which doesn't translate in real terms, and often falls short unless using it at longer ranges, or you get the jump on your target. As in a straight up shootout, you'll find yourself more often than not on the losing side. Also, when using the EM1 at longer ranges, as previously discussed, the directed energy from the weapon is a dead giveaway to your firing position, making you bantha fodder for all those snipers out there. On the upside, recoil, although a little unpredictable, is negligible. Although with it being a laser, it begs the question why it has any recoil at all. Anywho, this weapon is great for hipfire, probably the best in the game, which I could see being a real advantage on PC, as hipfire is far more useful on that platform. Also, its most obvious plus point is its lack of need for ammunition, which is a particular bonus and means you don't need to run things like scavenger and waste the slot of your precious pick 13. So, the EM1 is an interesting weapon, if a not very useful one in most game modes, aside from the hardcore playlist, where its lack of damage isn't such a handicap, and in such case this weapon can be pretty handy for both kills and suppression. Okay, first off, I'm probably murdering this name, but here goes nothing. The PYTEAK is your standard does what it says on the tin kind of LMG, and reminds me of weapons from previous Call of Duty incarnations such as the hammer and LSAT off the top of my head. The PYTEAK seems a pretty well balanced gun in most if not all aspects, aside from handling, which is particularly bad on this weapon. It also comes with good damage, only needing about 3 to 5 bullets in centre mass to get a kill, and comes with a really nice iron sight with its own little holographic hood built in as standard. Also, it has the best accuracy in its class and has a nifty little trick akin to the hammer from Black Ops 2, in that when fired this weapon's recoil reduces over time. And speaking of recoil, this is a major stumbling block for this weapon, as the recoil on this gun is pretty high and tends to obscure your vision a little. Also, you feel like you're walking around with lead weights on your feet as you move pretty slow, which is compounded by its low mobility stat. The exo jump goes some way to counteracting this, but lightweight is still a must for this weapon and class in general. So, this weapon isn't that great on average for use in Twitch shootouts. However, where this weapon really comes into play is in terms of suppressing lines of sight in order to help your team, as the ammo capacity on the PYTEAK is quite large and means you can throw a lot of lead downrange before needing to reload. Also, should you be inclined, it could be pretty useful for camping, even though it's a bit harder to do in this game. All in all, an okay weapon, if a little underwhelming. So, nothing worth writing home to mum and dad about. The XMG is easily one of the weirdest weapons in Advanced Warfare. This heavy weapon can only be fired akimbo, making it difficult to be accurate. It has a peculiar feature that when stationary, you can enter lockdown mode, which increases rate of fire and accuracy. The problem with this is you cannot move, and in such a dynamic game like Advanced Warfare, it leaves you as a sitting duck. Also, you cannot go prone with this weapon, which isn't really any great shakes unless you rely on drop shotting, which is less necessary in Advanced Warfare, or if you're a camper, in which case I would suggest you get your head checked, as this is not really the gun for such a strategy, unless you're into trolling people. This weapon has great firepower, massive magazine size, and good ammo capacity. On the downside, its handling, mobility and general accuracy is pretty poor. This weapon kinda reminds me of a weak war machine that can't ADS. So, this is another one of those weapons that is only useful in very rare circumstances, usually on game modes that are a bit of a clusterfuck. But personally, I think there are better weapons out there even for these circumstances. That said, you can still have a lot of fun messing about with the XMG. The EPM-1 is the second energy weapon to be featured in Advanced Warfare, and on paper looks like a beastly weapon, with it having good stats in nearly all areas. Damage, accuracy, fire rate, range, even mobility is pretty decent. The only place it's lacking is in handling, but I guess that factors in what kind of weapon this is. For all intensive purposes, this is more like a marksman rifle opposed to a directed energy weapon, akin to an EM1 for example, as this plasma rifle has by far the longest range in its class, and as such this weapon reminds me of an MK14 assault rifle or a LYNX sniper rifle with iron sights. Of course, minus the issue of ammo, as like the EM1 it has no ammo and instead with constant use will overheat, about 10 shots minimum, and needing a cooldown period before you can use it again. But like the EM1, this rarely becomes a problem. So you're probably thinking, this thing sounds pretty good. Well, like all weapons in this category, this heavy is underwhelming and in real terms isn't very effective, as it doesn't really work as a heavy or suppression weapon, nor does it work as a sniper rifle, so it's basically a marksman rifle in shiny wrapping paper. Which is a shame, as marksman rifles aren't very useful in Advanced Warfare due to the breakneck speed of this game, mostly thanks to the new XO movements. That is aside from classic playlists where XO movements are negated, and in hardcore playlists where this thing is actually a bit of a beast due to its range and pretty much 1 or maybe 2 hit stopping power. The Ameli makes a welcome return from Ghosts, which isn't something I thought I'd be saying about, well, anything from Ghosts. But that said, this solid LMG has been tweaked and feels significantly better than previous incarnations, and out of all of the heavy weapons feels the most akin to an assault rifle, which as we all know are king in Advanced Warfare. To be fair to the PYTEAK, there isn't that big of a difference between the two, aside from the Ameli's increased fire rate, which is the highest in its class, and its low accuracy, which makes it less useful for enemy suppression. But for me, this feels so much more mobile and useful in run and gun situations, which is the mainstay of where this game lies. This weapon has good power, range and fire rate, and a decent magazine size and ammo capacity, which can be hurt a little bit by its fire rate, but in such a case, Scavenger is your friend. So, a useful bit of kit, but seeing as it's not great for suppression and is the most akin to an assault rifle, you're probably still best off with running an assault rifle in most cases. The KF5 has the longest range in its class, and the first 5 rounds of each magazine deal increased damage, which really helps surpass its overall medium damage and take out those bad guys, especially if you reload frequently. The KF5 doesn't have a huge amount of downsides, with a decent clip size, good mobility, handling, accuracy and great range. If there's anything that lets this weapon down, it would be the middling damage this thing kicks out, of course after its initial power buff as previously discussed, which in turn can make it more challenging to get those multi-kills. So all in all, a pretty good weapon, and with the right attachments, things like foregrip, advanced rifling and dual magazines, in my opinion, can turn this good weapon into a great weapon. The MP11 is a wee little beastie. Just think the MP7 from Black Ops 2 shrunk down, sped up and on acid. This fully auto little monster has the highest mobility in its class and the second highest fire rate. And thanks to these things, when up close this thing just tears bitches up, even though it has middling damage. I can only assume this is thanks to its high fire rate. But with that, what the gods of Call of Duty give on one hand, they take away with another. As even though a magazine size of 32 rounds seems a reasonable amount, however, due to the amount of bullets this thing spits out, you're often left with few bullets in a mag, meaning frequent reloads come part and parcel with this gun. So something like fast hands is probably a good idea. On the downsides, this thing is often left wanting at anything beyond medium range. So anything you can do to improve that, i.e. foregrip, advanced rifling and so on, will really help you out. So, this is a decent gun, and as stated, in the right circumstances and on the right map, this thing feels pretty mighty. But due to its low range and relatively small clip, I find it a perfect weapon to whack on as a secondary with overkill for things like sniper rifles or LMGs. so as to bridge that close range gap where this weapon really excels. The ASM-1 is very much like the KF-5 in respects that this weapon, at least in my mind, feels like another reimagining of an old weapon, this time in the guise of a future version of the Thompson submachine gun. The ASM-1 has by far the highest damage in this class, and this thing has a cool little party trick, in that firing this weapon over time increases accuracy and decreases fire rate, which really helps you with its low to middling accuracy and range stats, which are pretty much its only downside, aside from fairly high recoil for an SMG, as everything else is either decent like clip size, fire rate, mobility and handling, or great like its damage. That said, I wasn't sure about this weapon at first, but the more I used it, the more I grew to like it, particularly at medium range. And for some reason, aside from the obvious recoil reduction, a foregrip attachment really elevates this to a far superior weapon, and things like advanced rifling and so on don't hurt either. So, like I said, this weapon tends to grow on you, kinda like a symbiotic parasite or a friendly mold. The SN6 is a curious little weapon, with by far the best accuracy in its class. This thing, in my opinion, is easily the best fully automatic submachine gun when it comes to range, even though it has a fairly average range stat. This must be due to its great accuracy and low/predictable recoil. On top of that, the first 3 rounds of each burst fire faster than the other bullets, which can help with taking out enemies. But even with that, this is where the problems with this gun really start to outweigh its usefulness, as this SMG has the weakest damage stat of all submachine guns, and even though on some weapons the difference is minimal, you can really notice it with the SN6. Aside from this, it has good iron sights, a solid fire rate, handling, mobility and a decent sized magazine. And even though it has low to middling range, for the reasons previously discussed, it doesn't seem to come into play. Originally on my first impressions video, I thought the SN6 was the best SMG, but the more and more I played with this gun, the more and more its weak power showed. And although decent at range, where it counts for an SMG is at those closer ranges, where it really falls short in comparison to the others in this class, and thus is an underwhelming weapon. If only it got a little power buff, it wouldn't seem so weak sauce. The SAC-3 has an extremely high fire rate, in fact the best in its class. However, unfortunately can only be used akimbo, meaning there will be no aiming down sights. This weapon feels a bit like a throwback and reminds me of the FMG9 dual-wield machine pistols from Modern Warfare 3, only with a little slower fire rate traded for a little more accuracy. The SAC-3 has decent damage, a great fire rate and good handling and mobility. Also, it has a great magazine capacity. This is mostly due to the fact that you have 2 weapons, hence double the amount of ammo overall in your clips. Also, if you box clever, you may never need to reload without having one of the 2 weapons ready to fire, as you can reload them independently if one of the guns is still full of ammo. That said, in general this weapon is a bit of a gimmick and is kinda like the XMG Heavy, but weaker and more mobile. So, like I said, the SAC-3 is only really useful as a secondary or in very specialist circumstances. The AMR-9 is a burst fire submachine gun, similar to the Chicom CQB from Black Ops 2. This weapon fires a burst of 5 bullets at a time and can support underbarrel attachments, i.e. grenade launchers and so on. This weapon to me sort of feels like an SMG assault rifle hybrid, as even though its range and accuracy seem average at best on paper, but due to its burst fire ability it is actually incredibly accurate with decent range to boot. Also, it has the capacity for underbarrel attachments akin to an assault rifle, giving you options to mix up your playstyle and at a much higher mobility and handling to your average assault rifle, which could come in useful on objective game modes. That said, and although it's great at range for a submachine gun, Due to its slow rate of fire between bursts, it struggles at close range compared to most weapons in its class. And on top of that, because it is a burst fire weapon, firing 5 shots at a time, this can leave its magazine capacity feeling very low, as it only holds 35 bullets, meaning you only get 7 shots per clip. Due to the reasons previously stated, this weapon is similar to the SAC-3, as it feels very much like a specialist weapon, but in the complete opposite direction. And thus, if you feel like you need a more calculated and accurate approach from your SMGs, then this is the weapon for you. Otherwise, I'd pick a different submachine gun if you like your shooty bang bang up close and personal. The BAL-27 is one of 2 starting weapons in the assault rifle category, and unlike a lot of starter weapons, is actually pretty good to boot. This assault rifle has good damage, handling and mobility, and by far the fastest rate of fire in its class, with an added little bonus that the rate of fire actually increases the longer you fire. And luckily, the recoil is low to medium and predictable, so the fire rate on this weapon doesn't become a bad thing. Its ammo capacity is decent, but as it spits out bullets pretty fast, reloads are frequent, so you may want to run either one or a combination of fast hands, extended mags and scavenger. All in all, this is a good gun. Some people swear by this gun as their favourite. For me, it's not the best gun, but it's not far off. I just feel it lacks a little at range and has a little higher recoil than most assault rifles, and as such feels like one of those SMG assault rifle hybrids, as it hip fires great and is easily the best assault rifle when up close and personal. And as you can use it from the get-go, there's little reason not to give this weapon a try. The AK-12 is the second of 2 starter weapons currently available in the assault rifle category, and the trademark of this weapon is that it has practically no recoil whatsoever, and what little there is so small and negligible it makes near no difference. That is, as long as you're accurate and true. If so, this weapon won't let you down, especially at those longer ranges. This is another gun making a return from a previous Call of Duty game. However, unlike most of the weapons from previous games, this one actually feels a fair bit different. Sure, in Ghosts it had low recoil and decent damage, but somehow still managed to feel like an AK. Instead, in Advanced Warfare, it feels much more akin to something like an M4 or M27. With its great accuracy, range, decent ammo and magazine capacity, and very low recoil, at least for a fully automatic weapon. So this weapon is the most manageable and balanced weapon of easily the best and most balanced class in Advanced Warfare, so this weapon is perfect for the less adept and more cautious player, as it is such a forgiving weapon. If this weapon is going to let you down anywhere, it's in terms of damage at shorter ranges, but all in all is a good, if modest, weapon. The HBRA-3 is a bit of a monster, and definitely has a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde sort of characteristic, as this weapon can be really unmanageable if equipped poorly, as the recoil on this thing, although predictable, is horrendous. However, when you equip a foregrip attachment, you'll be thinking, what recoil? As the difference is practically night and day. Also, the iron sights on this are so obtrusive it's ridiculous, and obscure a significant amount of your vision. If you feel like you can run iron sights and handle the recoil on this gun, more power to you. But for me, the red dot sight and foregrip attachments are a must for this weapon. With that said, this is pretty great and reminds me a bit of a Remington R5 from Ghosts, with its good damage and slow fire rate, aside from the first 3 rounds of course. This weapon also boasts the best handling in its class and holds onto its ammo very well, due to its general slow rate of fire. All its other stats are about average. Where this weapon differs significantly to the Remington is in its drop-off distance, as the power of this weapon diminishes quite a bit at range. Not to an unusable amount, but you'll definitely notice it. Still, for my money, this is one of the weapons duking it out for the top spot in the assault rifle category. The ARX-160 is yet another weapon from Ghosts. However, this weapon is nothing like its previous incarnation, as this weapon has switched from a fully automatic rifle to a 3-round burst fire rifle. The ARX has great range and accuracy, and decent stats everywhere else. Also, its clip and ammo capacity is more than abundant, which all sounds fine, right? Well, it would be if there wasn't another burst fire rifle in its class to compare it to, as the ARX just pales in comparison to the IMR, at least in its basic format. I could see how if tweaked correctly in one of the upgraded versions, this weapon could actually be pretty decent. But standing in the IMR's shadows, this thing just looks weak sauce. This weapon is basically the same as the original M16 from Modern Warfare, which isn't per se a bad thing, but compared to the more evolved weapons, it just looks like it stood still while all the other weapons developed. Still, that said, one of the worst weapons in the best class still ends up being a fairly decent weapon, if used and equipped correctly. The IMR. What to say about this beastie? Well, this thing just suits my playstyle to a T. The IMR is a 4-round burst fire weapon. High damage, accuracy, range and extremely well balanced stats in general. Even though on paper it will say different in terms of range and accuracy. But thanks to the fact that it's a burst fire weapon, it plays out quite different in real terms. Now, with all burst fire weapons there is a trade-off, but that is negated by the IMR's extremely high rate of fire in between bursts. Not completely negated, as you will still probably be better off at close range with a BAL or HBRA-3, but unlike the ARX for example, you can still easily get kills at close or even point blank range. The damage drop off on the IMR is fairly significant at longer ranges, and it can eat through your magazine capacity fairly quickly due to its fast burst fire, but nothing that can't be counteracted to a degree by the right attachments. However, this weapon's best selling point in my opinion are the fact that at mid-range this weapon is a 2-shot kill, even with a silencer, as long as you hit centre mass that is. And a party trick I forgot about when making my best class setup video is that this weapon 3D prints ammo in reserve, i.e. the ammo in your reserves, not the ammo in your magazine, slowly regenerates, possibly negating the need for scavenger. I can see how this weapon could be an acquired taste, but for me, this is another weapon duking it out for the top spot in Advanced Warfare. The MK14 makes yet another weapon returning from Ghosts, which before playing I was quite pleased about, as the marksman rifle class was one of the best things about Ghosts. And trust me, that is a short list. However, once I got my hands on this weapon, I was very disappointed, as this gun just feels out of place in Advanced Warfare, due in part to its low damage and slow fire rate, because of being a semi-automatic rifle. Its other stats are okay, particularly its accuracy, range and ammo, but this gun just doesn't make sense at any range. Up close it's useless. At middle range an IMR, BAL or HBRA-3 are far superior, and at long ranges you may as well go with a sniper rifle thanks to their high damage. So this weapon is a bit of a chocolate teapot, and was probably put in because of the success of the marksman class in Ghosts. But unfortunately this just doesn't translate to the clusterfuck gameplay in Advanced Warfare, due to the new exo movements creating such fast-paced gameplay, and thus this weapon just can't keep up, and at range it's so weak you can shoot people for days and not get the kill. I can't think of any reason why you wouldn't take a LYNX or a MAAWS with lightweight instead. So one to be avoided in my opinion, at least without a significant buff in the future. The TAC-19 shotgun is a pretty little machine, and differs to other shotguns, at least aesthetically, as it is a directed energy pump action shotgun, which appears to shoot some sort of sound or energy wave, which if used properly can just wreck fools, if up close and personal, which is kinda the problem with shotguns in general, especially in Advanced Warfare, as the ranges in which you can get kills with these things are just pitiful, particularly in this game. This is probably due to the greater mobility in Advanced Warfare, which does help somewhat especially with the TAC-19 as it has the greatest mobility in its class, but this doesn't go nowhere near enough to make amends for the abysmal range. That's not to say shotguns can't be useful in game modes such as Domination, Hardpoint, and maybe even games like Kill Confirmed and Momentum, but don't expect to have a high KD at the end of it. The TAC-19 probably has the longest range out of all shotguns, not that you can really tell, and probably the slowest reload out of all the shotguns, as you need to reload each shell individually. This gun is cool, but it saddens me to say this is probably yet another case of style over substance. The S12 makes a welcome return to Call of Duty, and can be a wee little beastie, if all up in the enemy's grill, and is definitely better than previous incarnations. The S12 also has the highest fire rate in its class, and just pumps out shells like they're going out of fashion, making reloads frequent and perks like Fast Hands and Scavenger a good idea. Also, this gun can be great for multi-kills on Domination and the like. In general, the S12 stats are quite well balanced, aside from in terms of accuracy and range, like all weapons in this category, making this downside negligible. So, not a whole lot else to say about this weapon. It's a good gun if you like spamming shotguns, but will invariably leave you wanting. So you thought there wasn't a whole lot to say about the S12? Well, there's even less to say about the Bulldog, as this shotgun is pretty much just copy and pasted from Ghosts. So if you're familiar with it from Ghosts, then you're probably familiar with it now, as little if anything seems to have changed with it. This weapon tends to sit somewhere in between the TAC-19 and the S12, as its fire rate is similar to the TAC-19 and its other stats are similar to the S12. With that, the range on this weapon seems to be the lowest of all the shotguns, which is saying something. The reload on this weapon is decent, as is the ammo capacity. Put simply, the Bulldog was pretty crap in Ghosts, and is still pretty crap now. This category, in my opinion, is crying out for slug rounds, as the range on these things is just embarrassing. The Atlas 45 is a semi-automatic pistol with the best handling in its class, a decent magazine size and fairly well balanced stats, and that's about it, as there's nothing more left that's positive to say about this gun. It's just so weak sauce it's unbelievable. The damage stat doesn't look too bad on paper, but when you keep in mind all of the weapons in this class are either burst fire or fully automatic, aside from the RW1, which outpowers it by 9 damage points, a completely different picture starts to present itself. I'm sure people have heard the term "this gun's been nerfed" when talking about recent update patches. Well, the Atlas 45 is a nerf gun, as there's absolutely no need to worry. You can shoot this thing all day and there's no chance of hurting an innocent soul, or anyone or anything in general, so it would make a perfect toy gun for little Timmy as a Christmas present. In all seriousness, this thing is junk and should be avoided like the plague. If this is your only option as a secondary, I suggest going without and spending that pick 13 point elsewhere. The RW1 is by far the most imaginative handgun, bar none, as this weapon is a break action railgun and has by far the most damage in its class. This thing kind of feels like a short range sniper rifle, if that's not an oxymoron, as it has great damage and 1 or 2 shot stopping power, and reloads similar to a bolt action sniper rifle. But a better comparison would be to that of a shotgun with slug rounds and great accuracy, as although it feels like a sniper, the drop off at range is significant and more akin to a break action shotgun firing slug rounds. And therein lies this weapon's biggest downfall, as it has great stats for a handgun, aside from its rate of fire, which to say is slow would be an understatement. However, its high power more than makes up for this, so probably a weapon for quickscopers and the more accurate a shot. Either way, regardless of how skilled you are, the RW1 is bags of fun. The MP443 Grach makes a return to Advanced Warfare from Ghosts, and is now like one of its extinction counterparts, as is a burst fire weapon. The Grach now shoots 2 bullets at a time each burst, and also probably has the most balanced stats of all the handguns, and in my opinion is the most versatile, practical and useful weapon out of all of the handguns currently available for your loadout. As not only has the damage increased from ghosts thanks to its burst fire, making this gun a close to mid-range 2-shot kill, presuming you can hit centre mass, but this weapon also has the best range in its class, which used to be a bit of a weakness for this gun in terms of damage drop off, which is no longer as significant, and unlike a lot of the other burst fire weapons, as it only fires 2 bullets at a time each burst, running out of ammo isn't too much of an issue. That said, the time between bursts could be a bit faster and can catch you out in shootouts at close range. The PDW also makes a return to Call of Duty from Ghosts to Advanced Warfare, this time becoming a fully automatic pistol instead of a burst-fire handgun, and has fairly good stats aside from range, where it falls a little short but is balanced out by having the highest fire rate in its class. And now, this weapon kind of reminds me of the machine pistols from Modern Warfare 3, as this weapon is pretty much an up close and personal spray and pray beastie, and for that purpose works extremely well, but its short range for a class that already has fairly short range really hurts it. So it might be a good addition for a sniper for when running through tight rooms and corridors, but at those longer ranges and even middle ranges may leave you short. Plus, its clip size as standard is kinda small and dwindles away quite quick, meaning fast hands or extended mags is a good idea. First up, the deployable heavy Riot Shield, not to be confused with the Exo Shield ability. This Riot Shield is mostly the same as previous incarnations, such as in Black Ops 2 and so on, aside from one major difference, in that you can now add attachments to the heavy Riot Shield akin to a gun, such as faster melee. This one kinda does what it says on the tin in making the melee faster. Shock Plant. This attachment creates an electrical shockwave in the surrounding area when the Riot Shield is planted. Then finally we have Fast Plant, as you may have guessed, increasing the speed in which it takes to deploy said Riot Shield. So nothing too crazy, but nevertheless it's a nice little touch which can add some customization to your shield class. That said, personally I don't really like to run a shield in general. I can see how it could come in useful in objective modes like hardpoint and so on, but personally I think I'd only use it to help protect my back, as getting shot in the back is a pet hate of mine. However, something that might be interesting would be running a heavy shield in combination with an exo shield, making you like a human turtle. But in general, I'd say a waste of your pick 13 unless you're big into pissing people off with your Riot Shield. The MDL is a semi-automatic grenade launcher that fires projectiles with a 2-second delay before detonation. This weapon reminds me of the MK32 from Ghosts, but worse in most if not all ways. As unlike the MK32, the projectiles are no longer Semtex rounds, meaning you can't get kills by sticking them to your opponents, nor to objective areas as for reliable kills and room clearances. Instead, the rounds are regular rounds akin to the War Machine from Black Ops 2 Zombies. On top of this, the MDL, unlike the MK32, is a primary weapon, meaning to get the most out of a class with this weapon, you're going to need to run overkill, taking up an extra slot of your pick 13. I struggle to think of any positives to this weapon, as why wouldn't you just run a MAYHEM launcher instead, as it can do pretty much the same thing, only better. Put simply, unless there's something I'm missing, the MDL is a piece of shit and best avoided. Okay, on this one I'm going to be bundling the crossbow into this category, as I'm classing it as a special weapon, seeing as it doesn't fit anywhere else and this seems the most logical place to put it, as they all seem like similar bedfellows. The crossbow is another weapon making a welcome return from Black Ops 2. Not a huge amount of difference between the two, as it's still a one shot then reload jobbing, with explosive tips and a bunch of attachments. The one great advantage this weapon has over the other weapons in this category is that it is classed as a secondary weapon, meaning you don't need to waste another of your pick 13 to make a crossbow class useful, as it is akin to a handgun in this respect. Another bonus is the crossbow can help you pick out targets at greater ranges than a pistol and has more reliable firepower than an MDL. On the downside, it only has an ammo capacity of 6, including the preloaded bolt, and its blast radius isn't that big. But all in all, not too shabby a weapon. But never mind what I think, what do you think of the guns in Advanced Warfare so far? Feel free to post your thoughts on the weapons in this class in the comments section. So, that just leaves me to say if you enjoyed this video, please help support us by liking, sharing, favouriting and subbing for more BS of a similar nature. Thank you and goodbye.